For the first few seconds, you might think you are in America, but only for the first few seconds. Then you realize something is not right. Then you understand everything is wrong. Then you understand this is not the United States. Trash, foul-smelling butchered animal carcasses on stalls, swarms of fat green flies, and groups of dirty children running between the market rows while their parents try to earn a few dozen dollars. Not American dollars, Liberian dollars, because this is a market in Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. But let's start from the beginning. When Jacob Gunn and his comrades, former slaves and descendants of slaves, declared Liberia's independence in 1847, they probably sincerely believed they were creating a state of free people, a country meant to replicate the path and success of the USA. The irony is that freedom, rights, and opportunities were concentrated in the hands of a small number of repatriates, as they called themselves, Americo-Liberians. It is appropriate to recall a similar situation in neighboring Sierra Leone, as the fates of these countries were closely intertwined. The capital, Freetown, was a city where 99% of the inhabitants could only guess about what freedom and civil rights meant. The thorough copying of the United States state system led to the creation of a grand facade, only resembling a real state. There was a presidential parliamentary republic, political parties reminiscent of Republicans and Democrats. There were congressmen and senators. The Capitol was built, and the flag closely resembled the American one. But there was one main difference. The black founding fathers of Liberia, unlike their overseas colleagues, wanted prosperity and equality not for the society they created, but for themselves and those like them who arrived with no connection to the local population and were at a much lower level of social and intellectual development than the former slaves. The only commonality was skin color. The exploitation and terrible treatment of the locals were such that those visitors who had been slaves in their youth said about them, "They have it much worse than I ever did on the plantations along the Mississippi River." The distribution of the young state's wealth, diamonds, iron ore, rubber, timber, coffee, cocoa, and gold, the desired and cursed metal, became the privilege of the aristocracy of the new free state, the descendants of those who sweated on the plantations and felt the overseers' blows. Among themselves, the elite spoke only English and practiced Protestant Christianity. Their inherited fellow citizens practiced pagan, often bloodthirsty religions with sacrifices. Distancing themselves as much as possible from the rest of the population, the Americo-Liberians did not try to introduce progress and education into the tribal societies of their country. Unlike the colonial administrations of neighboring European colonies, where the process of introducing civilization always proceeded to some extent, the forest people, as the Americo-Liberians contemptuously called them, remained extremely backward and wild, even compared to other tribes of western equatorial Africa. Politicians, officials, and senior officers of Liberia remained only the former slaves and their descendants who had arrived from the British Empire and the USA. This could not continue indefinitely. The enormous bubble of discontent, and at times outright hatred towards the ruling elite, which made up no more than 5% of the country's population, grew. It burst as a result of a military coup in 1980 by Sergeant Major Samuel Doe of the Liberian Army. He belonged to the Kron people, and Sergeant Major was probably the highest rank a native Liberian could hope for. It quickly became clear that the slogans under which Doe came to power, equality of all rights, fighting corruption, and fair distribution of national wealth, were no more than a facade for an ambitious sergeant major who became president by the capricious whims of fortune. The country, already lacking a strong economy, was set back decades. The arbitrariness of the authorities spawned many semi-criminal organizations and ordinary gangs, usually brutally cruel. They proudly called themselves freedom fighters for the people and had loud names like the National Salvation Front and similar. The state began to crack and fall apart. Eventually, the field commander of one such formation, Prince Johnson, lured Emmanuel Doe to a UN mission, kidnapped him, and subjected him to humiliating and brutal torture before killing him, filming this horrifying show on a video camera. This happened in 1989. And then in Liberia, created to be a bastion of European values on the continent, the horrifying specter of wild, merciless Africa appeared, with machetes drenched in the blood of victims and bracelets made of human skin. The Civil War began, lasting 8 bloody years. Charles Taylor became president, ironically receiving an economic education in America. Under him, the country plunged into complete chaos of economic disaster, total degradation of state institutions, and bloody permanent confrontation between the authorities and their opponents among ambitious field commanders. Taylor is remembered for many atrocities and crimes, including accusations of cannibalism, human sacrifices, supporting gangs from the Revolutionary United Front in neighboring Sierra Leone. Notably, during their infamous operation, which they, wiping their machetes of victims' blood with bunches of grass, called No Living Soul. They filled ravines on the outskirts of Freetown with bodies. Taylor was drawn to Sierra Leone by the infamous blood diamonds, which unfortunately abound in this area. Many remember the grotesque and mocking text of Taylor's campaign poster, "He killed your father, he killed your mother, vote for him." And the cynical scoundrel paradoxically won the elections with a result of 75%. To top it all, Liberia was swept by the whirlwind of the Second Civil War. Today, the country whose president is Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the first woman to hold the head of state position in Africa, is trying to establish some semblance of economic functioning and the work of civil institutions. But her presidency so far is the only manifestation of progressiveness in a country that was conceived as a prosperous bastion of freedom and success, a little piece of America on the shore of the Gulf of Guinea. Malaria, AIDS, and Ebola. These diseases literally decimate the population, which mostly remains caught between pagan superstitions and extreme poverty. There are very few doctors, and after the near-total withdrawal of the UN mission, which practically single-handedly provided Liberians with qualified medical care, many, if not the overwhelming majority, can only seek help from local shamans. What the real effect of this help is, one can only guess. Crime, especially petty street crime, is inevitably rampant given the predictably low level of economic development and the ineffective work of the thoroughly corrupt police. Among the locals, a special form of begging from white people is very common. To them, white people are somewhat higher beings, but at the same time, an easy way to earn money. A beggar in Monrovia might approach you, and for convincingly rolling their eyes, supposedly to help you, carry a bag of groceries to your car, a dozen meters away, and receiving their dollar, will persistently demand more, chattering the phrase, "small, small." And this is the safest and most harmless thing a white tourist might encounter. Even a patrol policeman you might meet on Allison Street in Monrovia will not inspire much confidence. An old worn-out uniform reminiscent of the American one, sometimes with Chinese rubber slippers on their feet. Appalling sanitation. In Monrovia, for example, 95% of residents have no sewage system, no running water, and during the rain, on the dirty streets, you can see the following picture: children trying to wash thoroughly in dirty puddles and sewers. A UN official aptly described the country's attitude towards garbage: the land of free trash. On the beaches of Monrovia, sometimes you can't even see the sand due to the plastic waste. The English language you are used to and the language spoken by a third of the Liberian population often have nothing in common except general phonetic sounds. Often, visitors listening to a tirade from a resident of the capital understand practically nothing. The poverty level is such that young girls offer themselves to foreign men just for clothes, for a pair of jeans or a bra. On an average salary in Liberia, which is $35–60 US, you can buy on the market. A hellish place itself, for example, 30 kilograms of rice, or 2 pairs of Chinese jeans, or an old mobile phone, possibly stolen last year from a careless European mission worker and unlocked by local craftsmen. This is the still rather bleak story of a country over which the star-spangled flag also proudly flies.